Hello everyone, Reza here. Welcome to my channel. This tutorial focuses on all the do's and don'ts you need to know about self-illuminated materials, or basically emissive materials inside Unreal Engine 5. We'll learn how to use the material input, how to change the intensity of the glow, how to use complementary nodes like Fresnel to break up the vanilla look that we get with the emissive materials. And of course, I'll include how to use texture masks if you wish to achieve our lighting emission through textures. As you can see, I have packed a lot of content in one video, so let's get started. All right, let's start with the scene itself. Very simple scene. As you can see, there's really not much to it. What I wanted to make sure was the scene is dark enough so I can sort of see the emissive materials in it. So what I have, if I zoom in, I've got a lab table with a few props, bits and pieces, but mainly I've got two bottles with materials on them. So if I go ahead and hide them, you can see I've got a water-like liquid, which I'm not going to touch, and I've got this little guy, which I'm going to turn into an emissive material. So that would be the subject that I will work on for the rest of this tutorial. Now, the scene itself is intentionally quite dim and dark, as I said. So if I go to post-process volume, I made sure that the post-process volume set to infinite bounds, so the bounds will get disregarded and you will have a full control over the exposure of your scene. Metering mode set to manual and exposure compensation set to 11.3, which is relatively dark for this particular example. Again, quite intentional. Even if I go to my directional light, I wanted to make sure that the intensity is set to 6. The default is set to 10. You can see it brightens up the room quite a fair bit. So I wanted to intentionally dim the room just to be able to work with this emissive material. All right, let's get to work. I've got few folders already in place, so we're not wasting any time on hierarchy creation, but please, for your own sake, make sure that you have that under control. I've got level, material, props, and textures. I'm going to go to material because this one is a master material default that I assigned to pretty much everything else but the bottles, the lid, and the liquid. I need one brand new one for this liquid right here. So I'm going to right click on here. You can access the same thing here. Going to material. I'm going to call that master material, emissive liquid. I'm going to double click on it. And of course, I wish to dock that so I can go back and forth without wasting any time. And probably the easiest way of plugging the emissive is to hold down 3, left click to bring a vector constant from out straight into emissive color. Now you go in here, you select your color, you give it brightness, you go OK, apply. Now I need to assign that obviously to my material, so drag and drop in there and we have our emissive. Now this is probably the simplest way of assigning a material, emissive material, to your object. All right, let's start from the sort of main material node itself, because there is a question that I get a lot, and that is about shading model. What shaping model you should use for your emissive. There are two types of shading model that you can use, unlit and lit. So if I go into right under material, I want to make sure that the material domain is set to surface. The blend mode is set to opaque because we're not using any translucent. You certainly can. Now shading model, you can switch between, or toggle rather, between unlit and default lit, and you get pretty much the same result. Now when to use what is something that you need to know. Now you should use unlit shading model if your emissive material is not going to interact with the lighting in the level. Let's say you're using this emissive material only to simulate the light source. Let's say you have a light bulb. Well, in that case, unlit would be the perfect choice. It's going to eliminate base color, metallic, specular, so on and so forth. It gives you only word position offset, emissive, and pixel depth offset. It's a lot cheaper to run. Now, the question is when to use the default lit shading model. You use it if you need your emissive material to use any of your other shader inputs, like base color, like normal, like roughness. So if I switch into default lit, we get them back, and they would be quite useful if you have texture masks as part of your emission, something that we will explore in this tutorial. Not right now. We are just going to experiment with solid color at the moment, at least for this particular chapter. So I'm going to select unlit. Hope that makes sense, and hope sort of we are on the same page on when to use what shading model. All right, I'm going to switch back to my content drawer, right click and create a material instance. I strictly would like to use material instance for my emissive liquid material. So I don't need to go through compiling my master material. Again, we have a tutorial on instance material versus master material. So feel free to check that out if you are not quite sure what I'm talking about. If I double click on instant material, we really don't have much. First things first, let's parameterize the color. I'm going to go right click, convert to parameter, and I'm going to call that emissive color. So that's good. If I save, I need to apply the instance material to my object as well. So I'm just going to hide the scene, select my instance material, and drag and drop it. We have this back. If I double click now, you can see that we're now having, if I bring them side by side, you can see that we are having live feedback now. I'm going to go and enable emissive color, and now I can go in there and change the emission however I like. So that's a power that we have with instance material. Now, the question is, how will I be able to intensify this? How will I be able to increase the intensity of it? Well, one very common way of doing this, and I've seen that many artists actually do that, is to actually go in there and increase its value. It's capped to 1. You can go ahead and put that value of 2 in there, and you intensify that, right? Another way of doing this is, if I reset these guys, is, for example, let's say we have blue as our channel, right? And I've seen that people go in there and multiply a value of 5 and increase that value like so. So you can actually put math in there and sort of work out the final value. I've seen people actually do this, and then they go overwrite the value. That's another way of doing it. But I personally would much prefer to do it inside the material graph. So how to do that? I'm going to hold down M on my keyboard, left click to bring the multiply node. So instead of multiplying the value inside your color chip, why don't you bring a multiply node? And I'm just going to hold down Control and move the wire from emissive color into a multiply. And multiply goes to emissive. And now I control the strength through just a simple constant vector. Simple as that. That would be the strength. I can easily go in there and convert that into a parameter, emissive strength. And the default value for this emissive strength would be value of 1. Now look what happens to my material instance as soon as I save I'm getting a strength here. If I go to my viewport, I can easily go in there and increase the emissive strength like so. So you can see I've got a separate attribute to control the color that I have. So I really don't need to worry about the value here and constantly tweak the value and the color via one attribute. I have them separate sitting on my material instance, and at any point of time I can reset the value like that. Fantastic. That's great. So let's go to the next chapter and see how we can sort of break up this vanilla look. All right, this is where we left off. I'm just going to go to master material and see how we can actually improve on what we have. I'm just going to dock that material instance, go in here. I would like to create that fall off using two different colors. So what do I mean by that? I'm going to hold down 3, create another 3 vector, and I'm going to sort of use that color right here, but make it slightly darker. And that's how you actually create a fall off, where the center, we've got the bright color. As we move towards the edges, you get a slightly different color. Guess what? I just explained what Fresnel is, and we have a Fresnel node inside Unreal Engine 5. So if I go in there to make use of this amazing expression, I need to find a way to combine these two and let Fresnel to take over the fall off side of it. Now, to combine these two, or to interpolate between two materials, there is a node called lerp. And again, we went over this lerp in the previous videos a lot. What lerp gives us is you can actually interpolate between A and B, and you get that alpha, which is priceless. When alpha is black, you get 100% of A. Well, when alpha is 1 or white, you get 100% of B. And of course, you can control alpha via other nodes. In our case, Fresnel. So that node can be quite handy. I'm just going to go and apply B to B, and I'm going to go hold down Control, detach the wire from A multiply and attach it to A lerp. Now we need more attributes in there, especially exponent in. So what is exponent in? That actually specifies how quickly the output value falls off. Why don't I actually control this attribute through a simple constant so I can extract it and use that in my material instance? And that's the beauty of having a material instance, because you can actually extract all of these values and control them in here. So let's go in there and parameterize that one, convert to parameter, and I'm going to call that Fresnel Strength. And I'm going to give this a value of 2 as agreed. And again, if it's too low or too high, we will fix that. So I'm just going to select these guys, move them to a side ever so slightly. Lerp node goes into multiply. Now it may not be quite visible, so what I can do in here, I can parameterize this one as well. So I'm just going to call that emissive color number 2. This one is emissive color number 1, and I'm going to go save, and I'm going to go in here into my material instance. Okay, let's play around with it and see what we're getting. So emissive material color 2, I can actually change that to something quite noticeable. I've noticed that usually yellow goes really well with green, so why don't we use that? Very quickly, you may have noticed that we're no longer just looking at a plain green color. there's a slight touch of yellow around it. I can go in there and change the Fresnel. I can go in there, change the emissive strength to something like 1.5 or even 0.8 and play around with Fresnel like this. And you can see how beautifully we're changing the look of our liquid. I can go in there and pick a different shade of green, like so, to give it a slight depth around or contour around the liquid. So these type of tricks are totally doable too. And you can see how quickly we're actually adding personality to our glow. Now that should do it for solid colors. So if you wish to use solid colors, again, these are the tricks that you can use to sort of take the look of your emissive color or emissive material to the next level. Let's go to the next chapter and see how we are going to use this if we have textures, and how we can make use of our maps to create emissive material for our objects. Now we know how to use solid colors to create our glowing material. Let's have a look at how we can bring in textures and texture masks to give this material a little bit of personality. So what I have in this scene, what I've imported is few textures. So we've got a diffuse texture, which is sRGB, the color space. We've got ambient occlusion. The color space is set to linear, so sRGB is unchecked. We also have this map right here. Now, to get the best result out of your work, it's best if you come up with a single channel map that comes from your diffuse map. So I've got my diffuse map here, and I made my a single channel texture mask out of my diffuse channel. And of course, if I double click on it, the color space for that needs to be turned off. I'm going to save that. Now, with that out of the way, I'm going to bring this material instance on the side. I will close this window right here, and let's go into our material graph and make some changes in our master material. Ideally, actually, I would like to detach this node tree altogether. So holding down Alt to sort of disconnect that node altogether. And I'm going to move that to the side, and we're going to start fresh. Now, for texture mask, you definitely want to change your shading model to lit. So I'm going to go and change it to default lit, because I do need to have certain channels enabled. I'm going to go to content drawer and bring in all four. You may say, Reza, why we're using texture masks? What would be the benefit of texture masks? There are two reasons. One is to use a texture to drive the color of our light emission. And the second benefit is at the same time, we actually use a scalar parameter, a single channel constant, to drive the intensity or strength of our emission light or emissive light. Let's see how it's done. So again, just to reiterate, it needs to be a single channel map. And with that, I need to specify what color I would like to assign to this emissive map. So that's where the first benefit comes to play, to change the color of our light emission. I'm holding down 3, left click to bring in a vector parameter. And let's actually benefit from the map that we have here, the base color that we have right here, and just sample the color like so. So I'm just going to sample the color, and I'm going to sort of intensify it. Excellent. This color is going to be our emissive color. So I'm just going to call that emissive color. I'm going to move these two ever so slightly back. In order to move forward, obviously, we need to multiply these two together. So holding down M, left click, and A goes to RGB. You can use a single channel like R as well. That is totally fine. And of course, B goes to our vector parameter. Then to funnel it into our emission color, again, I need to have a multiply node. So I'm just going to type in multiply. A goes in here to take care of the multiply, and B is going to look after the intensity of my emissive light. So that is nothing but a scalar parameter, which is a constant value. I put the constant value right here. And of course, that needs to be parameterized too. That's a very sort of important component here. And that is our emissive strength. So I'm just going to type in. And of course, I would like to give it a default value, which is a default value of 1. So just to recap, I specified the color, I specified the intensity, and multiplied into emissive color. And from this point onward, you can do all sorts of fun stuff. For example, we did talk about the panner node in our previous videos. So why don't we bring the panner just to add more interactivity to what we have? Let's say I'm just going to give it a very, very subtle value to our speed Y and Z. And of course, you can use scalar parameters for those as well and have full control over it. So I'm just going to go in here and create a constant value and apply that to our speed and parameterize that too. So I'm going to convert to a parameter and I'm going to call that speed as well. Now this panner goes to our UVs. And again, we did talk about that in our previous videos. So I'm going to go from coordinate to all the UVs that I have. UVs for our ambient occlusion, UVs for our roughness, and of course UVs for our base color. I probably go ahead and just move that all the way to the side and bring the panner node a little bit to this area right here. So I can sort of comment that and say animation. I can bring these guys right here and comment that too, and I'm going to call that emissive. And we have our texture attributes or texture in here as well. I can comment that too and call that textures. Beautiful. You can assign colors to them as well. So with that, everything is nice and clean. Now, with that done, I'm going to save and let's see changes in our map right here. And you can see how beautifully the color has been assigned. You have access to emissive color too. So I can go ahead and lower the emissive strength to something like 0.5 or 0.2. And I can start adding animation to my glow. I can go ahead, I actually change the color of my map as well. And all in all, you can see how intuitively you can actually add details to your self-illuminated material. And if you want, you can even create a parameter out of these textures and have a rollout, call them texture samples, and sort of add to the level of organization. So when I go in here, you can see under animation, now I have speed, which I can very quickly tweak. Under emission attributes, I have emission color and emission strength, which works beautifully. And all in all, it's just going to add to the level of organization. You can just move ahead and create a material function to repurpose it anytime you want. And that is really it. I really try to bring in anything to do with glow and emission into one tutorial. So hopefully that's going to be a one-stop shop for you guys. And I truly hope you found this tutorial useful and you use it in your own projects. Thank you again, and until the next video, see you guys later.